The heat clung to the stones of the Red Keep as if it had been built into them, a slow-breathing creature that gave off its own smothering life. The city smelled of fish and fruit gone soft in the sun, of human press and horse dung and tar-baked decks along the Blackwater. Flags stirred without conviction in a breeze that wandered along the ramparts and died on the iron spikes. In the Tower of the Hand, the air was no better, but the rooms were kept in orderly gloom. Shutters angled to spare the ink from going sticky, basins changed before their water could go warm. The hand of the king, Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell, did not much mind the heat or the gloom. He minded unruly city guards, careless courtiers, and the smell of dishonesty that soaked the palace like spilled wine. He stood over a table of letters, the late hand's lists, Lord Arryn's neat hand faltering on the last page, and the handwriting of others that he did not yet trust. He had slept little and found in wakefulness no remedy for the itch beneath his ribs. There were names in those letters that whispered together when the room was otherwise quiet. The bastard boys of King Robert, the butcher's lad on the Dragon Gate, riddle-laden passages about the seed being strong. Another document lay folded beneath his palm, a copy of a line from a lineage roll, colorless as a bone. "Your Grace," he had said to Robert yesterday at the council table, "there is much that was left unfinished by Lord Arryn." Robert had grunted, tore a capon with his hands, and laughed at some shot Renly had made about tourneys. The king wore care like a torn cloak, dragging, frayed, and easily let slip whenever wine was poured. Today, Eddard Stark had been told that his wife sat in a small chamber off the river gate with a prisoner in tow. The message had come not by raven but by a boy with bare feet and careful eyes, set loose by Varys like a little fish. "There are always more fish," the spider had murmured, "and there are always slips in the net." Ned left his letters where they lay, closed the shutters to give the paper a reprieve from the glare, and walked with his sworn men through corridors that seemed filled with watching. The Red Keep had too many eyes. He missed the Godswood at Winterfell, where the only watchers were the carved face in the heart tree and the birds. Catelyn wore the dust of the road like a veil, hair pinned under a plain hood, the purposeful stiffness of a woman who had walked quickly and thought furiously. Her hand was in the arm of a small man in travel-worn leather, who looked at the walls as if they were a game board and he had been transported to a tile he had not expected. Tyrion Lannister, or so he had named himself the last time Ned had seen him, a dwarf with mismatched eyes and an expression that served as both armor and invitation to be underestimated. "Cat," Ned said softly, because he would have embraced her if she had not made herself an audience, and he hated empty shows where tenderness should be. She smiled in that quick, tight way that said relief was not allowed to linger. "We needed you," she said, "so I came." She told him then, the dagger, the fight in the inn, the faces that had stood with her because she had made them choose. Peter Baelish had sworn the blade was Tyrion's, lost to him in a wager. Tyrion had laughed and said he liked sharp things but not when they pointed back at him. Ned listened, testing each word against the harsh-grained knowledge that every truth in this place wore borrowed clothes. "Bring him to the hand," Catelyn had told the hall at the crossroads, and they had. That he was here at all was a testament to her nerve and to the willingness of strangers to be flattered by their own good opinions of themselves. He could picture it, her voice, clear and level, naming them friend. It had always disarmed him. For years he had watched Catelyn move through rooms like a lantern that turned familiar faces toward her. Today he would much rather she had not lit this particular corner of the world. "My lord," Tyrion said, dipping his head just enough to be courtesy rather than subservience, "I hope your city is kinder to me than the road has been. Tried to kill me with boredom. Your wife tried rather more directly." "You know why," Ned said. Tyrion's mouth twitched. "I gathered it had something to do with a knife and my very poor habit of being born a Lannister. Lucky for me, if I wanted popularity, I might have been tall." Catelyn's eyes were not for the dwarf but for Ned, seeking agreement, sanction. She was bone-tired, but stubbornness had buoyed her across leagues. "He sent the man to murder Bran," she said. The edge of her voice snagged when she said their son's name. "He sent him." Ned wanted very much to turn the whole globe of his anger upon someone, to have a villain he could look in the face and break with logic or sword. But in the White Harbor God's Wood he had learned that prayer did not make the snows come sooner, and in war he had learned that needing a thing did not call it into being. He looked into Tyrion's clever face and saw nothing that matched the clumsy cruelty of a hired cutthroat with a Valyrian steel blade. "Where did you come by that dagger?" Ned asked. "In the pits of your wife's imagination," Tyrion said. One of the guards shifted his weight. Tyrion held his hands up. "Forgive me. I am predictable when anxious. If it makes any difference, I do not like children harmed. My family is not famous for its tenderness, but I have my own objections to imbecility." Peter said. Catelyn began. "Peter says many things," Tyrion cut in, and now there was something like venom in the lines of his smile, "and is paid to say them in the coin he prefers. Tension. I once won a purse at dice from him and returned it. The next week he convinced my father it had been a test of my honesty. Peter Baelish plants trees of sentiment in the minds of men and plucks the fruit when it suits him." "Enough," Ned said, because it was his habit to keep quarrels from becoming rehearsed plays. He turned to his men. "Ser Jorah, see Lord Tyrion given a guest chamber." Catelyn's breath caught. "A guest chamber? I am the king's hand," Ned said, quietly enough to be courteous and hard enough to be obeyed. "We do not seize lords on the road and drag them to secret cells, even for love of our sons. Tyrion will be treated as a lord until I have proof he is a criminal, and proof more than a blade that has passed through a dozen hands." Tyrion did not quite bow. He had an actor's instinct for when the scene should end. "You'll forgive me if I don't thank you effusively, Lord Stark. I find effusion cheap in this city." He glanced to Catelyn. "Lady, if you decide to kill me in my sleep, I recommend a pillow. Less litter than blood." When the dwarf had gone, set between two guards who had underestimated him on sight, Catelyn folded and refolded her fingers as if to teach them patience. "Bran might have died," she said. "He didn't," Ned said. "He did not say by whose stubborn will their boy clung to life." "Cut. You should not have taken him. The Lannisters own half the city and would like to lease the other half." "I had to act," she said. "I could not watch and do nothing. That is not something I was made for, Ned." "I know." He took her hands. "I know. And now we will act again, but with both eyes open." She slept after he sent for wine and food and a chamber that locked from within. When she slept, the hard lines of her mouth smoothed and he remembered her elbows in summer, freckled and brown. Eddard Stark stood over the city and knew that every choice he made was a door. There were many rooms. In most, someone he loved was hurt. He went to see Tyrion Lannister when the dwarf had washed and was staring out of the shutter slit at the line the river drew toward the bay. The air in the guest chamber was cooler, or perhaps cleverer. Tyrion leaned with his arms braced on the sill and smiled without turning. "I hear the city watch does not turn out for dwarfs unless they fall down wells. You are a generous host," he said. "I do not know if you are my guest yet," Ned said. "What do you know about the blade?" Tyrion shrugged. "I know that Peter claimed it was mine. I know that Peter courts your wife because she cannot give him what he wants. I know that my brother would murder a dozen boys who were not Bran, if it would keep one of my sister's secrets. But I am not my brother. And your sister? Cersei has a talent for believing the thing she most requires to be true. She believes that the world is hers by right, wine vats, men, letters, oaths. She believes she is her father's heir, rather than his daughter. She believes I was born to ruin her dinners and frighten her maids. She is good at believing, not so good at thinking about the shape of consequences." "What consequences do you see?" Ned asked. Tyrion turned then, and his eyes were very sharp. "That if you mean to keep your king alive and your daughter safe, you should stop telling your enemies what you will do before you've done it." Ned said nothing for a long breath. He had warned Cersei the day before, foolishly, honorably, because a wolf gives a stag a chance to run before the bite. He had warned her that he knew. She had smiled like a knife finding the place between male links. "What do you know?" Ned asked, careful as he might have been cutting a splinter from a child's palm. About the parentage of the king's children, Tyrion's mouth considered the question without haste. What everyone who has eyes should know, he said at last. That the late hand took an interest in black-haired bastards for good reason, and that each of your king's cubs is golden as the harvest. That my brother looks at my sister with a tenderness he never spares for others. That the seed is strong, as those tedious books say, and that strong things leave traces. He lifted the corner of his lip. You have the look of a man who wishes the gods would make this easy. They did not make me easy, and I doubt they will start now. Ned took in air that tasted of the river. If I should move against the queen, will you stand with me? Not with your father, not with your sister. With the realm. I am very fond of the realm, Tyrion said dryly. It is the only thing big enough to make me look smaller. But you are asking whether I will step between my family and this truth. My father will not forgive it. My sister will try to outweed it. My brother will try to kill it. Very well. I am used to being unpopular at home. The truth, at least, is occasionally amusing. You did not order the attack on my son, Ned said. No, the word lay on the sill between them and did not topple. Ask yourself, Lord Stark. Does a man who carries his wit like a glass cup trust a cutthroat with a Valyrian blade that can be traced? Or does he pay a drunk with a stale loaf to push, if anything? Whoever used that dagger wanted the evidence to point exactly where it pointed. That is Peter's kind of clever. Or a boy's. He glanced to the river again, impatient. Speaking of boys, your king's soft-hearted cousin has been serving him wine as if it were a duty ordained by the Seven. If you mean to make mischief for the queen, you might start there. Misrule begins in the cup. Lancel, Ned said. What of him? Tyrion smiled with all his teeth. He craves instruction. It would be a kindness to provide it. Perhaps with a stick. A gust pressed against the shutters. Outside, the city shouted. It always shouted. That was the sound of it breathing. Eddard Stark thought of Robert's hand cupping a wineskin. Thought of a boar that had not yet pierced the king's belly, of antlers and foam, mud disguised as earth and the earth disguised as safety. The gods seldom sent prophecies. They sent signs and expected men to be clever. I will speak to the king, Ned said. Do, Tyrion said, and do it before the wine speaks louder. Robert laughed when Ned told him. He was donning his hunting leathers, thick hair gone to gray at the temples making him look for a moment like his own ghost. That was the trick of the morning light when it managed to invade. Lancel, he guffawed. The boy has an arm like a stalk of wheat. If he keeps pouring, I'll drown before the boar touch me. What a way to go. He slapped his belly. Wouldn't Cersei like that, though? Wicked little bitch. He takes his instructions from the queen, Ned said. It would please me if the king took fewer instructions from the queen's bed. Robert's gaze sharpened. For once the wine had not yet singed the world to softness. His face, bare of smile, looked older. You sound like John, he said. He pried and pried. Then he sickened and died, and I lost him. If you would not lose more than that, Ned said. Listen, Lancel has given you wine heavy enough to fell a dray horse. The queen means to make you careless, then to make you dead, and to put a golden-headed boy on your chair as if that meant lineage. Send Lancel back to her with a sore ear. Drink water when you hunt. Take the hound, not your vanity. And when you return, do not let Cersei get within the reach of your good heart. The hound does not love me, Robert said, but it was all humorless and brittle. He loves killing. He loves order, Ned said. That's more than most in this castle can claim. Robert lifted a wineskin and then, to Ned's small surprise, set it down again. I am tired, Ned. Every hour of the day I am tired. I wake tired. I hunt tired so I can remember when I wasn't. I drink to pretend there is something left of me that is worth the titles. If Cersei is playing at murder, better a boar guts me than a bed. At least I'll smell honest earth when I go. You won't go, Ned said. Not now. Not while we need you to live and name truths that others will refuse. Do not make it easier for your enemies. Robert's gaze followed the light snagging on the steel of a spearhead leaned against the wall. Who are my enemies, Ned? Some days I can't find them for all the friends. Peter Baelish is not your friend, Ned said. He is perhaps not anyone's. Varys is your friend in the way a map is a friend. You do not bleed for it, but you can be lost without it. Janos Slynt is whoever paid him last. Cersei is your enemy because she cannot imagine a world where she does not win. Jaime is your enemy when Cersei asks him to be. Stannis is my enemy because he hates me for being loved, Robert said. Renly is my enemy because he thinks he is prettier than me. Stannis is your brother? Ned said, feeling the old weariness sidle into him like a cat. Brothers cut, but they can be stitched. Wives remember. Robert rubbed his eyes with a big hand and sighed. I will take water in the hunt, he said, as if granting a boon that chafed him. I will let the hound ride before and after. I will make a show of being a king if that is what it takes to keep from being a corpse. And when I return, if there is proof that my sons are not mine, I will have heads. By the gods, Ned, I will have heads. Proof will be ready, Ned said, though proof in this city played fox to their hounds. And the boy, Robert said, turning at last to the subject he had avoided. Tyrion, a sharper friend than most, Ned said, and more honest than he pretends. He will not drink what Cersei pours, and he has a long memory. I'll need men with long memories, Robert said. Go do what you like with him. Gods know perhaps a Lannister who is not trying to bed my wife or kill me will be a novelty I can bear. Ned left the king wearing his hunting cloak, the one lined with green silk that Cersei loathed because it made him look like a lord and not a spectacle. The hound took a long look at the waterskin handed to him, uncorked it, sniffed and grunted approval. Lancel hovered until Robert struck him across the ear with a laugh that had 4 kernels of real fondness in it. Go cry to your lady, boy, Robert said. Tell her the stag's horns are sharper when he is sober. The hunt clattered out through the king's gate with banners low and hounds impatient. In the hush that followed, the castle's heartbeat returned to its usual dysrh weighing. Varys drifted to Ned as if he had been made of the same cotton in which he swaddled his words. The king is well advised, Varys said mildly, and here I had feared you were a man of too much honor. I have no abundance of anything, Ned said. Least of all time. Ah, Varys said, and that single syllable contained more sympathy than most men had in a year. Then I will save yours. If you intend to move against the queen, may I suggest you not confide in Peter Baelish? He is very good at catching fish, and very poor at eating them. What do you want, Lord Varys? Ned asked. A realm where children grow to be men rather than corpses, Varys said, and for a moment his eyes were not soft at all. One tires of the smell of smoke. Shall I tell you a little truth, Lord Stark? The queen wrote to her father 2 days past. The ravens were watched. The rookeries are, after all, full of birds that sing for different hands. Tywin Lannister knows that something is amiss. If you mean to pluck his daughter, be ready for the lion's lunge. What would you have me do? Fold? Ned asked, letting sharpness in. I will not. I know, Varys said, and gave a minute bow, which is why I have set certain small delays in motion. Your wife is at the Red Keep. Your daughters are at court. I would rather not see them snatched. If we are lucky, the king will return with all his blood inside him, and then we shall see how golden the queen feels. Luck, Ned thought, was another word for someone else's work. He found Tyrion in an antechamber near the small council's hall. The dwarf was standing on a stool to pull a heavy tome from a shelf and looked for all the world like a boy caught stealing cakes. He hopped down with ease, book thudding onto a table. Ah, Tyrion said, the hand returns from the lion's den. How many claws did you lose? None, Ned said. The king rides sober. The queen is deprived of a certain ally in the cellars. Thank you. You will forgive me if I do not weep for Lancel, Tyrion said. Now, shall we speak of Janos Slynt? Ned Saturday, what of him? Tyrion tapped the book. Accounts. He has grown fat on them. There is a way to count that is not mathematical. You look at a man's shoes, his wife's rings, the way his children never go hungry, and compare it to his pay. Janos Slint has a talent for the remainder. He is bought, Ned said. Or leased, Tyrion replied. If you mean to rely on the city watch, you must buy more dearly than the man who owns him. By his men, too. Better yet, by the next man to have his office. Replace him. And with whom? Ned asked. I do not keep spare commanders in my sleeve. Tyrion raised a brow. Stout, can be bribed with flattery more than coin. Loyal to a fault once given a place to be proud of? Perhaps a commoner who has seen both sides of a cudgel. Bronn would do, but you would hate him. A more civic-minded brute exists. I'll find him. It would amuse me. Peter Baelish will not stand idle, Ned said. Peter will play whichever tune is called the loudest, Tyrion said. He thinks you do not understand the dance. Prove him wrong. Eddard Stark had not been made for dances. He had been made for snow and duty and mornings crisp enough to bite your lungs. Yet he understood battle, and this would be one. He sent Ser Jorah to inquire quietly among the watch for men with long service and short patience for Slint. He sent a raven to Stannis Baratheon at Dragonstone sealed with his privat. A seal, without the flourishes that made messages take too long to read, stating plainly what he knew of the children's parentage, the trail of hair and eye that led through the seed-strong families to a conclusion that would not alter because a woman wished it. He sent a second bird to Riverrun for Hoster Tully's counsel. Then he tore that letter in half and sent to Winterfell instead, because he wanted to hear his own people's names. He told himself this was to make preparations should the river should turn red. The truth was simpler. He left one matter for the end. Peter Baelish presented himself with the cheerful shrug of a man who has convinced himself that no blade could ever pierce his fine clothes. My Lord Hand, he said, I hear your little wife has been making sport with one of my enemies. If you were lonely, you had only to ask. Ned looked at him. Peter's smile wavered just an inch. Lord Baelish, Ned said in a voice that could have been mistaken for politeness. You told my wife that a dagger belonged to Tyrion Lannister. Tell me how you know this. Peter splayed his fingers. Oh, the blade. Such a nice thing. I recognized it. I had it once. Lost it to the imp in a wager. You lost, Ned said. You are not a man who loses what he wants. Wants change, Peter said, blithe. And so do circumstances. And so does loyalty, Ned said. I will thank you to keep yours to the king. If you cannot do that, keep silent. You wound me, Peter murmured. I had thought we were friends. We are nothing, Ned said, and left the room before he wasted breath that might be needed for shouting later. The city bent in the wind of rumor. The king's hunt did not end in a bier. It ended with a boar broken by 4 spears and a king who rode in with a tusk wound along his thigh that was nasty but shallow and a temper that made the court fall back as a tide. Cersei had arranged herself to be magnificent in silk the color of white wine. When Robert strode past her without a glance, her face cracked for a heartbeat and then was new again. Hand, Robert bellowed. Walk. They went to the council chamber where the table had been polished to a shine that showed the faces of men in pale blur. Barristan Selmy stood just inside the door, his posture an apology for his king's rage and his own helplessness to stop it. Renly appeared and vanished like a bird that thought better of landing. Tell me again, Robert said. What you told me before I rode. Ned said it. He said it simply, and he laid what proof he had while the room filled with the sound of Barristan not breathing. He read aloud from the Book of Lineages. He set down the hair-true comparisons that Jon Arryn had made. He named the city's bastards and their black feathers. He did not look to the door when it opened, and he did not look at the queen when she entered. He had learned that if a man looked directly at a roaring fire, he might miss the sparks that burned. It is lies, Cersei said, with her voice quiet and thick, the way honey will fall from a spoon after it has made up its mind. It is an insult to your house and mine. It is the North's revenge for being dragged into the light. Your children have the hair of your father and none of mine. Robert said. He had been a handsome man and was now only magnificent in the way of a crumbling temple. I have bastards in every district of this city that prove a seed travels true. You expect me to believe that I fathered 3 golden cubs because the gods thought it a jest. Cersei moved to him on the room's tide of cold. You would make monsters of your own sons because you want another war, she said. You cannot have the trident again, Robert. There is only age ahead of you. If you believe this, you will make orphans out of innocence because Lord Stark is jealous of Lannister wealth. I am jealous of nothing you have, Ned said, least of all your children. Her eyes slid to him with the slow pleasure of a cat looking down a mouse hole. Honor has made a fool of you before, Lord Stark. It will do so again. Robert hit her then. The sound was like a board striking the side of a boat. Cersei took it and smiled, but there were teeth in that smile. I shall wear this as a crown, she said, and left them with the mild rustle of her gown scraping the floor. The king was shaking. He turned to Barristan and said hoarsely, Bring the children to their chambers. Put guards who are mine upon their doors, not gold cloaks who bow to coin. Mine. My lord, Barristan said. His voice had the gravel of his years and the leather of vows. It will be done. And her, Robert said. There is a moment when a sword is drawn and the sound is half the killing. Cersei had not gotten far enough down the corridor to miss the hound's shadow. Ned listened for the scuff of boot leather, the authority of command. Robert's hand clenched. Hold her, Robert said. Hold her for trial. She will not see her father's banners for a year. By then it will be too late. It was a clever order because it was a cruel order. They did not need to risk the chaos of a beheading. They could let the city talk itself hoarse. Cersei would hate the indignity more than any pain. Ned found that even now he pitied her. There were many reasons to despise a person. Sometimes the reason was merely that they were themselves too brightly. He summoned Tyrion in the next hour. The dwarf came at a quick hop, hair sweat damp, eyes very bright. I hear there is to be a family gathering, he said, glancing over his shoulder to see if his shadow wore a lion's head yet. The queen is held, Ned said. The king's command. Tyrion's lips went thin. Well, he said, the first stone is thrown. Be sure to move quickly before the landslide goes the other way. Janos Slint, Ned said. Ah, Tyrion said. Shall I fetch him for you or bring you a substitute already trained to stand to heal? I will require both, Ned said. And coin, enough to make the watch feel sudden affection for the law. You will also require the absence of Peter Baelish from any room containing other men with purses, Tyrion said. Leave that to me. There are ways to encourage a man to spend more time with his brothels and less with his office. How do you plan to keep him there? Ned asked. With paperwork, Tyrion said, with a sweetness that had an edge. Peter hates the drudgery he is supposed to love. I will remind him of it until he remembers something else he prefers. The next days had the quality of thick cloth. Everything moved through them with resistance. Cersei was confined, not in a dungeon but in a set of chambers that overlooked the inner ward, where she could see banners and not renew them. Her children, golden and bright as any lion cubs, were kept from her in a fashion that was both gentle and merciless. Tommen cried at night. Myrcella did not cry. Joffrey raged. He tried to command the guards in his mother's name, and they stood wooden as fence posts. He tried to command them in his own, and they looked to Barristan for order. The Lord Commander's gaze was iron. Janos Slint arrived sweating and affable, and left with less affability and more sweat after Ned had told him that his service was now concluded. Tyrion had a man ready. Jacelyn Bywater was not brilliant, but he was stubborn and clean-faced and too proud of his modest boots to sell them. When told that his duty was to the realm rather than to any purse, he had the decency to look as if both magnitudes of duty might be tested. He set the watch to drilling for the first time anyone could remember, and some of the men, discovering that they had stomachs again, grew angry with the man who had stolen their pride previously. Peter Baelish tried twice to secure an audience and was twice delayed by a clerk who seemed to have learned absently from Tyrion the art of moving paper in circles. The second time, Peter sent a girl with hair like spun copper to deliver a message to the hand. A friend should not be treated as a stranger, the message said. Ned sent back, a stranger should not be treated as a friend. The copper-haired girl made the mistake of smiling when she left the hand's tower. She stopped smiling when she found Tyrion in the corridor, and the dwarf gave her a solemn look like a priest offering absolution and told her a story about a cat and a mouse that was only funny because he made it so. Letters flew. Stannis Baratheon's reply came folded like iron. He did not waste ink on pleasantries. If the thing you say is true, my brother is a cuckold and his heirs are not his, Stannis wrote. In that case, I am the rightful king upon Robert's death, but since he is not dead, I am merely the rightful heir. Will you arrest the queen? Will you hold the children? If you do, I will bring men and ships to represent the law. Renly's letter came as well, a longer one with flourishes and a postscript that made a joke at his own expense while flattering the Norths. This city is a snake pit, Renly wrote. I recommend boots and a long stick. There was no promise in it, but there was not a threat either, and he asked after Sansa's grace and Arya's sword in a tone that said he had actually noticed them. Ned would have been grateful for one night of dreamless sleep. Instead, he went to the practice yard and watched Syrio Farrell instruct Arya to see with more than eyes. Arya grinned fiercely at him across the dusty square, and he folded the grin into himself where a man keeps his reasons for doing what frightens him. Sansa watched too sometimes, face composed and distant. She was learning to wear that face the way Catelyn had learned to wear a lady's patience. Ned hated that for her, but he could not give his daughters a world in which no one wore masks. He could only try to keep knives from behind the masks. Tyrion connived, which was in this case a virtue. He sowed little tears in the web of the Queen's old alliances, and he smoothed others. He visited Varys and left laughing. He visited Grand Maester Pycelle and left with his mouth thinned in contempt. He found the boy singer in the kitchens who had once been told by Cersei that his song was too sad for winter and promised him a silver stag if he would sing it beneath the Queen's window at noon each day. In 3 days, the Queen had heard more sorrow than a burial. Do you pity her? Ned asked him in one of the rooms where the sunlight acknowledged the furniture and left it be. Tyrion was drinking watered wine and looking pleased with his own thoughts. I pity anyone who cannot imagine losing, Tyrion said. They take it badly when it comes. All trauma, no practice. She has children, Ned said. So do many bad people, Tyrion said, matter of fact. I know. Your heart is very large and should be bled at leeches for use in times of scarcity. Sit down, Lord Stark. You are cold as a boy in winter. I have something that will warm you. He tossed a folded paper. A list of names. Men who owe too much to Lannister purses. We have turned 3 of them. One, I fear, is too loyal to his own coin to change. Which? Ned asked. Janos may be out, but his shadow is not, Tyrion said. A little man named Allard. He will give Peter what Peter wants if Peter asks with green enough eyes. I will send Bywater, Ned said. He is not the cleverest, but he does not sleep at his post. That is more than half the art of staying alive, Tyrion said cheerfully. That, and knowing when a woman is lying. Do you? Ned asked. Not as often as I'd like, Tyrion said. He grew sober. When will you put your proof before the realm? When the king gives me leave, Ned said. He wants to move with deliberation. He did not add that Robert had spent the afternoon staring at his hand on the haft of a spear as if he were reading lines there. Deliberation is a polite word for fear, Tyrion said. You need a lever, something that moves more weight than you can lift alone. Stannis, Ned said. Stannis is a lever that lifts in only one direction. Upward, Tyrion said, grimacing. But yes, he will not be moved by beauty or fear or gold, which means he will stand like a lighthouse while the rest of us crash and capsize. And Renly, Tyrion said lightly. will bring with him smiles wide enough to cross the Blackwater and the Tyrells if they like the color of the wind. He will look well in a crown and be very annoyed at how heavy it feels. You see much, Ned said. I see what others step over while they quarrel, Tyrion said. Another advantage of being low to the ground. They had days of such talk, and nights where the city breathed fire somewhere beyond the walls and men woke thinking their own houses burned. Twice, men were found in the lower bailey who wore knives and had too few reasons to be there. Once, a page with hair the color of old straw was discovered beneath the stairs in the Hand's Tower with a note in his mouth and a coin in his boot. The note had never been meant to reach anyone. Tyrion read it and smirked. Varys is practicing calligraphy with someone else's hand, he said. How industrious. He wants to see who catches the note and who watches them catch it. Ned tried to decide whether to be irritated, grateful, or both. He settled on both. He saw Cersei only once in that period. She had sent for him. He went because it was not in him to refuse calls to difficult rooms. She stood by the window in a gown of pale green that made her look like she had been painted there by an artist who had grown bored of life. You think you have won because you have put me in a cage, she said without turning. You could feel the cold even with the shutters open. There are no cages in this city, Ned said. There are only rooms men guard. They open when keys are turned. He did not move closer. You endangered the king. He endangers himself every day, Cersei said, voice low. He endangers the realm by being too lazy to rule it and too proud to let anyone else do it. He endangers my children by swiving anything that breathes and boasting about it in public. I endanger only his pride. You endanger the truth, Ned said. She laughed then and at last turned. There was color high in her cheeks, a brightness in her eyes like a fever taken as a lover. Truth? You are a northern fool. Truth is the thing men agree to share while they take what they want. You want your honor. Robert wants to pretend he is still the stag of summer. And I want the world to look like me. I am the only one honest enough to say it. She paced toward him in little steps, like a cat that likes the corner into which it drives the mouse. You should have taken the children and sent me to my father. He would have come with armies, and there would have been a clean war. But you have chosen to parade your proof and wait. Do you know how much can happen while men wait? Less, Ned said. When doors are watched. You think Varys is your friend, she said. You think Tyrion is your ally. You think Stannis will be your shield. You do not understand that men like Peter are the ones who win. They do not play to win the first battle. They play to be the last surviving player at the board. You will have a fair trial, Ned said. He was aware of the uselessness of the word fair in this place, and hated himself for saying it. You are very kind, Cersei said. She cocked her head. Do they tell you that? That you are kind? Do you like hearing it? Ned said nothing. She smiled again very slightly. I will not be in fetters forever, she said, and returned her gaze to the sunlit yard where men were crossing, tiny and intent and briefly alive. Jory returned with word from the city watch. Bywater had dismissed another dozen men and replaced them with boys with sharp faces and old men with calm eyes. Janos Slint had taken up residence in a house paid for with coin no one could account for and was entertaining guests who spoke in whispers that said both Lannister and fear. Peter had vanished into brothels for 3 days and then into the counting house where he remained with 4 scribes until a girl came to the door with a tray of sweetmeats and a message sealed with a stamp that no one there recognized. Baelish is moving his lines, Tyrion said when told, perhaps only rearranging them. He cannot stand to do nothing. It is a weakness. Is it? Ned asked. I find I cannot stand to do nothing either. You do nothing very well, Tyrion said, not unkindly. You do nothing that looks like patience. It is a rarer skill in this swamp. In the end, it was not Peter who sprung the first counterstroke, nor Tywin. It was Jaime. The Kingslayer came to the city at dusk dressed in his finest, with the sun at his back like a blessing, and asked to see his sister. When the guards declined, he asked to see the king. When Barristan told him the king was at prayer, Robert had been taught that kneeling in the sept made a good show of deliberation. Jaime laughed, a warm sound like a pretty boy in summer, and turned his horse in a circle so the city could admire him. "You cannot hold the queen," he said finally, pleasant as a man ordering wine. "Release her to me." "The queen is held by order of the king," Barristan said, not moving. "My father will ride," Jaime said. "He rides often," Barristan said. "He will ride more. The roads will enjoy his company." Jaime's smile skewed. "Barristan," he said, "you have been a sword so long you have become dull. And you," Barristan said, "have been beautiful so long that you think it is a virtue." Jaime's eyes cooled. "I challenge the hand," he said. Ned had approached at the first word, stepped by step, and now stood where the words could find him. "You cannot," he said. "There is no such office in law. You can challenge me if you like, but I will not fight you. I have work to do." "You always did," Jaime said. "Work, duty." Knotted hair and somber faces in a castle that smells of damp dogs. He was smiling again, but there was a slight tremor in the line of his jaw, and it pleased Ned to see it because he did not like himself for being entirely above such things. "You hold my sister like a common thief. Release her. She will stand trial," Ned said. "She will have a voice." Jaime's voice had long fingers. "And my nephews? My niece? Will they stand on stools and be questioned too?" "They will be kept safe," Ned said. "Safer than most in this city. If any harm comes to them," Jaime said very softly now, "I will take Sansa Stark from her bed and cut her throat and leave you her head in a basket." Men who did not know Eddard Stark feared his stillness. Tyrion, coming along the corridor a breath too late, had time to observe it clearly. It was not merely lack of movement. It was not a lake untroubled by wind. It was a force. "If you threaten my daughters again," Ned said, "I will forget that you are sworn to protect the king, and I will kill you where you stand. I will have to be very clever and very fast to do it. It will be worth it." A breath later both of them had moved, but not toward swords. They were fathers first for that second, and in that second were truer than their titles. After the city resumed, Jaime departed without his sister. 3 days later, ravens came from the west. Tywin Lannister demanded the release of Cersei and the restoration of the children to their mother's care. He demanded the dismissal of Eddard Stark as hand. He demanded gold for insult, gold for the Watch's presumption, gold for the injury to Lancel that had made the boy's ear ring like a bell for an afternoon. The ravens made their demands in men's hands, but they smelled a parchment-stuffed man who saw the world as black marks on pages and obedience as a simple calculation. Pain applied here equals motion there. Ned and Robert sat with the letters on the council table and watched them as if they might evaporate or hatch. Renly played with a ruby that caught the lamplight. Varys folded his hands in that penitence gesture that meant he was thinking of 10 conversations that would have to be had before noon. Pycelle breathed a thin, medicinal wheeze. Peter, dragged at last from his papers, leaned and smiled at the letters as if flirting. "Tywin can demand what he likes," Robert said. "I will send him a hog and my piss in a skin." "You will send him men," Renly said, cool. "Or you will not, but either way you will want to make a show. The realm is watching, brother. They smell blood like hounds." Robert rubbed his forehead. "I am not at war with my wife's father." "You are not at war with anyone until you are," Tyrion said pleasantly, as if speaking to a child he liked. "I recommend you do not make your first move at his table." "You seem very certain where his table is," Peter said wryly. "Our little Lannister has become a map." "Little men are often maps to larger ones," Tyrion said. "May I suggest, Your Grace, that we rely upon law? The Queen is to be tried. Let her father bring protests to court, where we can hear them and reply. If he brings swords instead, we can reply with those too, but the sequence matters." "Stannis will bring ships," Renly said. "He will write to the Lord's declarant with words that have dust on them, but the dust is honorable. The Vale will sit and consider. Hoster Tully will cough and send Edmure to shout for him. The Tyrells will hold their breath to see which way the gold blows. He smiled faintly. I am very perceptive today. Must be the heat. We do not need more cleverness, Robert snapped. We need to keep this city from becoming a stew of guts. Then do not let Peter near the spoon, Tyrion said and smiled. Peter's composure flickered. He had built a life on the ability to smile when others flung mud. Being told bluntly to stay out of the pot was a new kind of insult. He bowed. I am merely the keeper of coin, your grace. You are the keeper of mischief, Robert said. Keep it somewhere else. After the council, Ned went to the rookery again. He sent more letters. He sent words north and east and south, and sometimes he thought he was little more than a bird himself, carrying his own voice to rooms that would open and close without changing his shape. He tried not to think about the fact that most men believe what they want to believe. He had spent his life trying to be a man who wanted little. It made him a poor salesman. That night, Arya came to his chamber with a cut across the knuckles where Syrio had rapped her for letting her eyes lie to her. She looked fierce and too thin. Ned cleaned the cut himself with water from a jug that had not yet warmed, and Arya watched him as if he were a warrior preparing his blade. When will we go home? She asked. When we can, he said. Soon? She asked. I hope so, he said. I don't, she said, surprising him. I want to see the Queen's face when she loses. Don't say that where someone else will hear, he said gently. Words can be knives. I like knives, she said, but she flushed, and he knew she had only wanted him to smile. Sansa avoided him. She had perfected the art. She drifted through rooms as if the rooms were made for her movement alone. When he caught her in the corridor and asked after her day, she replied with a courtesy that fit precisely into the space made for it and no more. He did not know how to reach through the city's iron and take her hand back. She loved Joffrey, and she loved an idea of court that the court itself would delight in ruining. Tyrion spent an afternoon with Sansa, while the ladies embroidered in a room that smelled of lavender and sweat. He told a story that made even Septa Mordane laugh and afterward stood beside the window looking out at the city's steaming roofs. She is unhappy, Ned said, joining him. She is young, Tyrion said. It is a recipe for unhappiness in a city men have seasoned with lies. She loved him, Ned said. She loved a promise that he could not keep, Tyrion said. If it makes you feel better, many women have loved worse. Your daughter is not a fool. She is at a disadvantage because she wants to be good. And you? Ned asked. Do you want to be good? Tyrion considered. I want to be unafraid, he said finally. Failing that, I want to be amused. Failing that, I want to survive. You have helped me, Ned said. The words were poor coin, but he found he wanted to spend them. Do not mistake that for goodness, Tyrion said, but he did not sound like a man who objected to the mistake being made. The day set for Cersei's first hearing dawned overcast. A sky like a chain shirt pulled over the city. People gathered early, and the air had the smell of a crowd. Salt, onion, iron, excitement. The throne room had been arranged with chairs and benches that no one would use and with tapestries that whispered other histories. Barristan stood with two other white cloaks, impassive as statues. The queen was brought in wearing gray and no jewelry. It was a clever dress. It made her look like a woman rather than a relic or a goddess, and some hearts in the room shifted toward her for that. Joffrey was not present, nor were his siblings. Robert entered last, with Ned at his side and Renly behind like a colophon's flourish. Grand Maester Pycelle intoned. Lawyers murmured. The charges, conspiracy, adultery, endangering the king, were read to a silence that was only partially out of respect. Then the room grew noisy the way a throat clears. Cersei answered, every word a step in a dance whose patterns she had studied since she was a girl. My lord husband, she said, you are sorely used. This lie is a lie men prefer to a truth they find unpleasant. That they mislike a woman when she uses power better than they do. Did you lie with your brother? Robert asked. The bluntness cut the cloth of ceremony like a ripping sound. The air cracked. In that instant, The realm hung on the lip of an answer. Cersei looked at him with all the contempt she had ever saved. "If I did," she said, "I did it because you were too drunk to come to my bed and too proud to bring a woman with less hair to it." A hiss, a roar, a grinding sound as 1,000 minds tried to make one decision. Tyrion, standing against a pillar where he could see all faces and process every expression like a ledger, smiled a small, private smile. "There," he whispered to himself, because no one else deserved to hear it. "There it is." Cersei had not admitted guilt. She had offered an affront greater than guilt to a king whose pride was a more tender organ than his heart. Robert's face had gone the deep, dangerous red that lives at the end of a very small fuse. He lifted a hand. For a breath, Ned thought he would strike her here, in front of the court and the realm, and the room would break and the world after it. Instead, Robert pointed. "Take her," he said. His voice was iron-cooled in water. "Lock her tighter. The rest we will decide when I am finished considering a dozen other things I have put off too long." He turned. "Lord Stark, we will draft a proclamation. We will send to Dragonstone. We will call the lords to court and ask them whether they prefer law or chaos." Cersei laughed as they took her away. It rang against the pillars brightly. Plaintive songs under her windows had not kept her silent. This would not either. She was a storm in a satin dress, and she had learned to enjoy being the flood. Outside, the city swallowed the news like a man who had not eaten in 3 days, without chewing. Fires were lit, songs were sung, blades were honed, and in some corners bargains were made that would make men sick 10 years hence to remember them. In the Street of Flower, a baker iced a cake with a stag trampling a lion, laughing until a lion's man slid a knife through his shoulder and nicked the icing with the same movement. In the Street of Silk, girls made jokes about golden hair and who had laid with whom, and then drew lots to see who would be clever enough to survive when men who had not paid their debts came asking for more. Ned found no satisfaction in any of it. He met with Bywater and his captains, with Barristan and the other White Cloaks, with Varys and Tyrion and Renly, and in each meeting the sense of a wheel rolling began to grow. Once a wheel rolls, he thought, there are two kinds of men, those underneath and those running trying to keep up. "Tywin will not wait for winter," Tyrion said. Hours later, in a room where the lamps made pools of light like islands in an ink sea. "He will send men to harry the riverlands and prove that he cannot be insulted without a price." "My father is at Riverrun," Ned said quietly. His voice did not change in thickness or pitch, but Tyrion understood that the sea beneath it had risen. "I will write to my father," Tyrion said. "He will not do what I ask, but he may hesitate if the letter is amusing." "You would stand against him," Ned said. It was not a question, not anymore. Tyrion poured wine and let it curve into his cup like a piece of writing. "I would stand for myself." He lifted the cup, tasted the wine, and grimaced. And for the unpleasantly cheerful feeling of being on the side that might be called right by fools in songs. "Do not get used to it. It is bad for the digestion." There was a knock. Varys slipped inside with the air of a man trying to look as if he had never had a secret. "We have a small problem," he said. Ned closed his eyes briefly. "How large?" "Only as large as a child," Varys said. Joffrey eluded his guards. He went to see his mother. "How?" Ned asked, already moving. "Men who feel sorry for boys grow careless," Varys said, with the sadness of a gardener who loves plants and hates weeds. "He is back now. His face looks like a thundercloud, which is to say normal." Ned found the boy in his chamber with 2 guards standing as if carved. Joffrey's lip had been bitten until it bled. He stared at Ned as if his stare were a knife and he might put it to use with sufficient force. "You will hang for this," Joffrey said. "All of you. I will be king and I will have your head." "You will be nothing," Ned said evenly. "But what the law makes of you." Joffrey's eyes brimmed. He had his mother's beauty and his grandfather's mouth and something that belonged to neither. That terrible, childish certainty that his wishes were the only real things in the world. Ned felt a bolt of unexpected pity, as swift and unhelpful as summer lightning. Then he left the room and told Bywater to triple the guard. At dawn, a rider came reeling through the mud gate like a man bearing plague. He brought a story. Ser Gregor Clegane was riding with men through the riverlands, burning and taking and worse. Tywin had not declared war. He simply had remembered an old habit and put it on like a glove. "Here it is," Tyrion said, as if greeting a friend he disliked whom he had always expected. The beginning of the end of something. Robert turned the news in the light like a gem. Then he went to the throne room before the court had dressed and called for parchment. He dictated orders in a voice that left no space for charm. The mountain was to be put to question and declared beyond the law. Lord Tywin was summoned to court to answer for his men. If he did not come, he would be named traitor and the West would be subject to the king's displeasure, which was a phrase that held multitudes. "Send Beric Dondarrion," Ned said. Out of that stock of practicalities a life of winter had instilled in him. "He is quick and honorable, and men follow him because his face makes them want to be seen beside him. Give him a letter with the king's seal. Give him the sword of your meaning. It may be enough." Robert nodded. "Do it," he said. Ned did it. He found Beric in a tavern near the Iron Gate and delivered him responsibility like a cloak. Beric smiled that mild, handsome smile, the one that made you think of a painting without noticing the cracks. He took the letter and then took men, the sort of men who believed the law was a thing that could be affixed to a lance. Ned watched them ride out with the sun at their backs. He wondered if the city would look different when they returned, or if the city made a habit of looking the same no matter how much of the world outside burned. He met Tyrion again in the rookery, because it had become their habit to meet in rooms where birds watched and said nothing. The dwarf wore a look that could be mistaken for joy by anyone who had never seen joy. "You find this amusing," Ned said. "I find it invigorating," Tyrion said. "For years I have been the cleverest man in rooms where cleverness was used to pass one another cups of wine. Now, at least the wine is poisoned and the cups are sharp." "You are a strange man," Ned said. "So are you," Tyrion returned. "For a man who insists on being good." They were interrupted by the scrape of boots.
Ser barrista intered, face grave.
Men looked graver in that room. Perhaps the ravens judged them. "Your Grace would see you," he told Ned. To Tyrion he offered a small courtesy, a tilt of the head that meant he did not dislike him. Robert was in his chair with a parchment unrolled like a skinning. "I have written a thing," he said, irritated with himself. "You will amend it. Stannis's name is here. He will like that. Renly's is not. He will forgive it. If he does not, we'll find him something else to polish." It was a declaration, not quite a proclamation, setting forth the law of succession and the place of the queen within it, removing her from council and forbidding her from speaking with the princes until the trial was concluded. It also set a line for the throne should the king die without legitimate issue. Stannis first, by all rights, then Renly, with explanations spelled in the plain speech of the law. It was a good document. It was also tender. "Sign it," Robert said. "Have the seal pressed. Read it tomorrow to the court." Ned glanced up. "Tomorrow? Why not?" Robert said. "Every day we wait some fool thinks he has an idea. I am tired of other men's ideas." Eddard Stark looked at the shape of the world with the knowledge that he could not control its contours, only the way he set his feet upon them. "Tomorrow," he said. The night before tomorrow was longer than most. Strange how time stretched like pitch when you wanted it crisp. Ned walked the walls and stepped into shadows and out of them. He went to see the girls. He told Sansa a story about a she-wolf who found her way home in winter by following her own blood trail back because it had been bright against the snow. He told Arya nothing, and she understood him better for it. He went to the sept and knelt because the gods did not live only in trees. He spoke to the old gods anyway, because he had never learned to speak to anyone else with ease. Tyrion did not sleep. He sent one more letter to the west, a sharp and dangerous thing that might prick a lion's paw if it could get under it. He arranged for a mule to be kept ready at the king's gate for 3 days. He did not know yet whether he would need to flee or to fetch someone, and mules were honest, patient beasts. He walked through the small council chamber and moved a chair 6 inches to the left so that the man who sat in it would be in shadow rather than light and might feel, subliminally, less bold. He did these things to remind himself that there were things to be done. At dawn, Varys came to him with eyes that did not have their usual sheen. Janos Slint's discarded shadow, he said, has found a new lantern. Peter has them. They will not move without greater profit than the king is prepared to offer. I could have told you that, Tyrion said, too quickly. Then he frowned. So what is your news? Peter has spoken to Lord Stark's men, Varys said. He invited them to drink. He advised them that their wages might be in arrears soon and that generous men do not value coin too highly when making friends. And, Tyrion asked. Ser Jorah declined with a hand on his sword, Varys said, and there was the faintest flicker of something that might have been admiration. Others did not. Tyrion sighed through his nose. Well, he said, then we must be more generous than Peter, and in ways he cannot manage. The throne room brimmed. On days when the court gathered to hear words made important by the place in which they were spoken, the room was an instrument. The high ceilings made sound into a procession. The columns made men into spectators of themselves. Robert sat the iron throne with his legs planted wide as if daring it to prick him. He looked well. He looked like a king who had decided not to drink himself to death for another day, and sometimes that was the best a realm could ask. Ned stood by his side. Stannis was not present, nor Renly. This was Robert's choice, and Ned thought it wise for once. Let the brothers be invited to consent, not asked to witness. The herald announced titles until even the lords who loved their own names grew drowsy. Then Ned stepped forward with the parchment in his hands. He read. He read clearly, his voice like clean water. The room felt it. Men adjusted their weight as if preparing for a blow. Women stared like statues. Peter leaned against a pillar, bored to the point of prayer. Varys's eyes were lowered. Tyrion watched everyone watching. When Ned had finished, Robert did not ask for argument. He raised a hand. This is the law, he said. I am finished letting men with smaller hands put their fingers in my meat. The Queen will stand trial on charges to be published within 3 days. The lords will swear to this order of succession. If they do not, they may leave my court and go consider their consciences elsewhere. Peter moved first. He did not move toward the door. He clapped 3 soft smacks that could have been flies dying. Beautifully read, he said. I feel as if I have been to church. Do you suppose, Your Grace, that Stannis will join us to receive his blessings? Robert glared. Stannis will come when I call him. And if, by ill chance, he delays? Peter asked. His eyes slid to the side where Renly now stood in the doorway, as if drawn by the question's gravity. Shall we crown both at once when the time comes? It would be quite a pageant. Renly smiled. I look better in gold. Quiet, Robert snapped. Before the next sentence could be born, a messenger blundered in through the side door with blood on his sleeve. It was the sort of theater the gods loved. He fell to one knee and gasped. Lord Hand, he panted. Ser Beric, he was set upon in the night. The mountain. The letter was torn, the men scattered. He rides toward the west. Fires in the riverlands. Lady went, Harrenhal. The roads are... Enough, Robert said. But the word was always too small to stop the news. The court roiled. Men rose and shouted that bandits were everywhere, that justice was a sieve, that their villages had names and those names were not songs. Peter smiled. Varys closed his eyes. Tyrion watched Ned take the blow and stand. We will make this right, Ned said, and the words were a promise. And he saw in the faces around him that promises were dangerous now because men were counting them like coin. That night Ned and Tyrion met again, because a habit becomes a habit precisely when you need it to. The O'Carey seemed restless, as if the birds had learned to fear the way men used them. Ned stood and stared into the black window where the city stores its reflections. We are in it, then, he said. We were always in it, Tyrion said. We are only now near the middle. You could go, Ned said suddenly. You could take a dozen guards and go west. Your father would forgive much in exchange for your tongue." Tyrion laughed. "You do not understand my father," he said. "But you understand me just enough. I will stay. If we lose, and we may, I will lose in good company for once. If we win, I will have a story that will make my brother's face twitch for years." He lifted his cup in a little salute. "And I like irritating Jaime. It's companionable, like scratching an old scar." Ned almost smiled. "You are a strange man," he said again. "And you, Lord Stark," Tyrion replied, "are the only honest liar in this city. You lie to yourself about what you can forgive. You lie to yourself about how much you enjoy being better than the rest of us. But you do not lie to others when it matters. It is a new thing. It is inconvenient. I find I like it." They stood a while without speaking. The birds shifted, whispered their indifferent arithmetic. Somewhere in the castle, a woman sang a lullaby in a language that sounded like water running over stone. Ned thought of Winterfell, the quiet that had texture rather than emptiness. He thought of Bran and his stubborn heart. He thought of Catelyn, who loved like a river, constant, altered by stones, powerful in the places where it narrowed. "We will have war," he said. He did not say against whom, because that would be all of them and more besides. "We will have something that looks like war," Tyrion said. "But first we will have a very busy morning." "Why?" Ned asked. Tyrion grinned. "Because I have invited Peter to an errand and he has agreed. It will keep him in the counting house while your men make a very delicate switch of a very ugly man who has been doing very ugly things." "A lard," Ned said. "A lard," Tyrion confirmed. "Bronn will do the lifting. He enjoys being paid for that feeling of inevitability he gets when he looks at men like a lard." He tilted his head. "Try to sleep, Lord Stark." "I will," Ned said, knowing he would not. He did sleep, eventually, like a man who falls through ice and does not fight the water. He woke at dawn with a certainty in his bones, as if the gods had deigned to wrap his marrow in a warning. The certainty did not tell him what would happen. It merely told him that today was made for happening. By mid-morning the switch had been made. Allard unseated, a better man put in his place in a maneuver that left the gold cloaks blinking and, in some cases, cheering because the new man remembered their children's names and the old one remembered only their debts. Peter was indeed in the counting house, counting the same figures twice and pretending to be surprised that they came to the same sum. Varys delivered 2 notes to 2 different doors and then walked along the upper gallery humming like a man who had always loved a particular song. Bywater's men found in a storeroom 3 crates of crossbows with wax strings and bolts carved subtly thinner than usual to pierce quicker, a gift Peter had intended for whomever paid him most in the afternoon. Near noon, a small procession made its way from Cersei's chambers to the Sept, where a septon with hair like ash would hear the reading of the articles against her. Cersei walked as if she had chosen to go to the Sept of her own will, for white cloaks bracketed her. The crowd was thick and eager. Joffrey watched from a balcony with a face like a hearth grown cold. The bolt came from nowhere and killed nothing. It thumped into the shoulder of the man walking 3 paces behind Cersei, a guardsman who had once thought to go into carpentry and had instead learned to stand perfectly still in armor. He cried out in surprise and the crowd screamed with him, and the moment folded into another moment. Men lunging toward the balcony, men crying Lannister and Stark and King, as if the words were weapons. Ned was there. He had made himself be there because a man should stand and look when a thing is done in his name. He drew his sword not to use it but to show that he could. The blade was an argument. He held it like the center of a conversation. "Hold!" he shouted, and the sound of his voice struck the crowd like a hand slapping a cheek. It did not stop all movement. It stopped enough. Bywater's men were quicker than the rest. They found the man with the second crossbow in a cupboard where he had hidden and dragged him into the glare. He spit and cursed and said he had no name worth knowing. It was a lie. He had 2 names, both bought. Tyrion appeared as if conjured and asked him, pleasantly, whether he had ever heard a dwarf scream. The man looked at him for the peculiar half-moment men reserved for the unexpected, and in that half-moment his bravado failed him. He began to talk. He talked too much. He spoke Peter's name and then took it back. He spoke Janos Slint's shadow. He spoke gold. Bywater looked to Ned. Ned looked to Robert. Robert looked like a man who had finally found in himself a vein of something that would run if tapped. "Find them," he said. "Bring them to me." Peter was not at the counting house when they went. He was where men like him always were when the world turned upright for a second, in a place with 2 exits. He slipped along a wall in a robe that made him look like a priest and out a postern gate that had been left unbarred with the kind of care that is the twin of neglect. He would not go far. He loved the city too much. He would go just far enough to gather himself and his stories back together. Ned did not waste men chasing him out of the walls. Better to hunt snakes in their holes than in the grass. That evening they sat together and counted what had been done. Cersei was alive and under guard more tightly than before. Joffrey had watched and learned the wrong lesson, that he was a target and therefore important. The city had seen a weapon pointed at the queen's back and drawn its conclusions. The hand was serious, the king was serious, the law was a thing with teeth. "They will hate you more," Tyrion said. "They hate me already," Ned said. "I mean the ones you care about," Tyrion said gently. "The ones who think you could have done it differently. The ones who think there was a clean way." "There was not," Ned said. "I know," Tyrion said. "I am just telling you what they will think. It's what I'm good for." "What will you do when your father rides?" Ned asked. "Prepare to be very unpopular at family suppers," Tyrion said, "and bring a better joke than the ones he likes to tell. He enjoys only the ones where someone bleeds. I prefer ones where someone thinks." They shared a silence that felt like a truce. When night fell again, it fell with a kind of honesty the day had not had. The sky made no claims, simply darkened. The city became itself, dangerous and beautiful, lit by fires that warmed and burned indiscriminately. Ned walked once more along the walls and watched the river take moonlight and make it its own. He did not think about how far away Winterfell was because he could not think about everything at once. He thought about his daughters. He thought about the king. He thought about whether a man could be both honorable and effective in a place like this. And he thought that perhaps today he had come as close to discovering the answer as he would ever be allowed. Deep within the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister lay awake and stared at the ceiling. She had never before imagined that someone would dare lock her away and keep the key on a ring that did not belong to a Lannister. She was not afraid. Fear was for women who had not learned to use it as a blade. She was furious in the manner of a starved fire. "They have taken the world and made it small," she thought, "but I have been small before." She remembered being a girl, being taught to quiet her voice and to sit with her knees together while her brother roamed the halls like a prince. She had learned then that smallness could be used as leverage. She smiled in the dark. "They are fools. They think cages are made of iron. They are made of belief. I will unmake theirs." In a chamber near the outer wall, Peter Baelish leaned against a shutter and watched the moon climb and thought about the game as a map with too many pieces. He had misstepped. He accepted it the way a man accepts a mosquito bite. Annoyed, not surprised. He would not misstep again, not for some time. He had his brothels, which were the city's real temples. He had men who liked gold more than bread. He had a story to tell when stories were once more wanted. He taught himself to be patient in that hour. He did not enjoy it. He would not forget the debt. In the Hall of the Hand, Varys sat a long while in a chair and listened to the sleeping of the castle, its breaths and mutters. He thought of a boy he had been once, in a place that had no pity, and he thought of boys now, Tommen, who would be gentle if allowed, little Smith's sons who would die in fields they had never walked before, Arya Stark with her wolf eyes, Joffrey, who would always love himself too well to live safely. He thought of the word realm and the way it seemed to make something more than men. He folded his hands and prayed to no one in particular. At the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion raised a cup and then put it down. He sat by the window with the shutters open to a night that smelled less like garlic and more like sky. He had chosen his side. It had not been a difficult choice, but it had been an odd one. He thought of his father's face, of his sister's mouth, of his brother's laugh like bright steel. He thought of his own short legs and his long memory. He thought of a woman once who had looked at him and not seen a flaw or a joke. He did not drink to any of these. He did not speak. He was learning that sometimes silence is a sharper thing than any word. Eddard Stark slept, but lightly, like a man who has left his door unbarred. He dreamed of snow. He dreamed of a tall boy climbing a tower and falling and not falling. He dreamed of a stag, bloody and proud, standing in a river that ran backward. He woke before dawn with his hand on the hilt of a sword that had not been drawn. He rose. He dressed. He went to work. The morrow would bring new demands and more letters and men who wanted different things and some who wanted only to live. Tywin's banners would be on the roads, even if no trumpet had sounded. Barrack's men would mosey in ones and twos to woods where they would learn to be something else. Perhaps Stannis would come like a ship seen through fog, slow, inevitable. Perhaps Renly would smile and set men moving with it. Perhaps the Queen would smile and be a storm in chains. But in that moment, just before the sun bled up into the sky and made everything over again, Ned Stark let himself believe in a narrow, difficult victory. That it was possible to make law more than a word, to make a king more than a man in a chair, to make a friend out of a Lannister, and to make it all stand long enough to send 2 girls safely home. He set his palm against the cool stone of the window as if the castle were a living thing whose heart he could feel if he pressed hard enough. And the city, piece by piece, woke to another day in which the game would be played and men would make moves they had been imagining in the dark. The heat would come. The air would grow full of shouting. But for a breath, there was only the flat gray light, the quiet in the blood, and the knowledge that sometimes the right allies were the most unlikely, and that a man like Tyrion Lannister, freed by a Stark he ought to have hated, might yet be the cleverness honor needs to keep from being crushed.